Hey folks, I am Kevin Iole from Yahoo Sports, and I appreciate you joining me. And today I've got three of the best minds in MMA for you. We are going to talk UFC 249, UFC's future, what is going on. Joining me, let's do it this a little bit clockwise. So my former compadre at Yahoo Sports, the editor, the Top Gun, the man at Wrestling Observer, Dave Meltzer. How are you, Dave?
I'm doing great. How you doing, Kevin?
I am doing awesome. I know I feel good when we can get you tech savvy here to get you on a Zoom meeting. This is big. So I'd love to have you, Dave. Thanks. And next to him is another one of my former colleagues, Andreas Hale from DAZN. Andreas, what's going on, pal?
Nothing much, just surviving this self-quarantine.
Las Vegas is a different place. Is our next guest, my good friend, the man in the blue shirt, John Morgan will tell you. John Morgan from MMA Junkie. How are you, John?
I'm quickly finding out how bad of an elementary school teacher I am. That's what's going on for me. So life is different these days.
Yeah, that's I can imagine that's a tough job as opposed to sitting at fights and having fun chatting back and forth with each other. We are actually now having to work for a living. So we're finding out what the other half is like. But I wanted to start discussion about this week and sort of Dana White's insistence of putting UFC 249 at all costs. And John, let me start with you. You travel to almost all the events. If this card would have come off, would you have been at the Tachi Palace covering UFC 249?
Yeah, I was. I had been in contact with the organization, in contact with my employers, and discussion with my family as well, to be honest with you, about, everything that entails. Are we okay with it? But I would have been there. I know I'm in the minority on this. I was okay with the UFC carrying on. I was okay with the schedule happening, with the understanding that there would have to be some very significant changes into the way things were handled. And I do think, as we move forward, that's going to have to happen anyway. We're not going to get to go back to life as it was. But I was okay with that. And, I was told that I would be allowed to attend. And I think that as a journalist, there was a little bit of a responsibility there. I mean, we kind of joke about what we do for a living. I mean, sitting cage shot and watching fights, it's not the toughest job. And when we call ourselves journalists against people that are doing a lot more important journalistic work than what we do, sometimes I get a little uncomfortable with that. I'm like, well, I mean, I fly around and watch fights and talk about them. But this was a real story. This was something that mattered. And I think it would have been good to have an independent journalist. Not that, the UFC and ESPN wouldn't do a fine job of documenting everything that was happening there. But I wanted to be there with my own eyes to make sure, how are things being handled? What is being done? What steps are being taken to ensure fighter safety, athlete safety, support staff safety, all those things. So I was planning on being there. My family understood, and my wife had some protocols in place for how she would have expected me to conduct myself and how much hand washing I would be doing and changing of clothes and all those certain things. But yes, to answer your question, I would have been there.
I would have been there too, assuming I had gotten credentialed for the event. But because I felt like it's the biggest story in sports right now going on, and the fact that there is no other sports just by default, I guess, made it the biggest story. But because of what Dana did to go to those extraordinary lengths to get it done. And Dave, let me ask you this then, because would you have attended the fight? Because not far from where you live. But B, even bigger. What was your thought? Did you think this was a good move by Dana to pull this off?
I probably would not go because I've kind of been self-quarantined in the house. It was about a 170-mile drive, and that's not bad. And I've been to Lemoore for fights before, but I would not, just because I'm not going anywhere here now anyway, and it would kind of feel wrong to me to do that for me. But as far as I can understand Dana, wanting to do it. Everyone who does sports, I think, wants to be able to do it. Everyone who has a business wants to operate their business and that. But I knew it was going to be real tough. Obviously it was going to be real tough, and I didn't think it was the right move to make right now. There are just so many aspects of it. I just felt that with so many people making so many sacrifices, that granted it is entertainment, and I've seen and pro wrestling's gone on. The difference is I think that MMA for the fighters, I think it's more dangerous than pro wrestling. And when you throw in like the weight cuts that these guys have to do, if they would have gone in there and said, okay, everyone fight at whatever it is, 15, 20 pounds above your normal weight, and you throw out weight cuts, I would probably have a little bit of a different idea. I probably still would be against it, but I wouldn't be as much against it, because when guys cut weight, now all of a sudden guys, when they're cutting weight the last week of camp, they get sick more often than normal. And this is not a good time to get sick, because number one, you might,
your immune system.
if you're coughing and sneezing, they can't let you fight, even if you're not testing positive. And so you're asking for trouble the last couple of days. And second, if your immune system's down, it's not good right now. So no, I was not really okay with them fighting under these circumstances.
Now, Andreas, I know you're a very socially conscious guy. And, my objection to it was, if you could have told me, hey, this is going to be safe and then we can put this on, and not only are the people who are going to be at this event be safe, but they're not going to bring it back to Las Vegas or San Jose or wherever they happen to live and infect somebody else, then I'd have been okay with it. But given the fact that I wasn't sure that they could do that, that's where my objection came. How did you look at this? I mean, did you feel like the decision to go on when the NBA, Major League Baseball, everybody else is stopping, did you understand Dana's rationale?
From a business perspective, I did, but my issue is the same as Dave's. It's just there's too much risk involved. There's too much unknown, and there's too much that could possibly happen with so many fighters, cutmen, referees, judges. You have too many variables involved where we don't have this thing contained yet, that I felt like it was morally irresponsible for Dana to push forward as hard as he did. Although I completely understand, because Khabib and Tony Ferguson was a fight that everybody wanted to see. It was huge business. But once Khabib fell out, and once the travel bans were there, and once we had so many other sporting organizations that are bigger than the UFC, like the NBA, shutting down, I felt like the risk was just too big. I wouldn't have been there. I just thought it was morally irresponsible. I mean, I have a wife and a child, and I wouldn't want to put them at risk. And, I have a family member who has coronavirus right now as well. So it's dealing with those aspects. I felt like it would have been just a little bit too much with too many people involved, that if you can't flatten the hump if you have this many people, and then they all have to go home. Let's just say somebody gets hurt, has to go to the hospital. They need hospital beds. There's just too much involved for this fight to go on.
Yeah, the thing that concerned me really about this when I looked at it is, I said, not only what about keeping it safe, but the message that is sent out. And Dana is a highly influential person, especially among MMA fans. And if, you see somebody like that, you idolize, you look up to, and he's putting this on, do you say, you know what, I can go out now, this, this old guy Fauci, what does he know, stay at home, Dana's out, Dana's saying we got to live our lives, we'll do that. And so that to me was also, in addition just to not keeping it safe, that was also something that had kind of concerned me about that. Here's the other thing. I wrote a column and I noticed, and it just got posted today, I'm getting a little bit of blowback on this. I saw some people online yesterday when the card was finally canceled that were celebrating. Now, there were some people, I want to make two distinctions here. There were some people that were saying, hey, it was the right thing to stop. And I think that was the vast majority of people. You can't make it safe. There's a pandemic. We shouldn't be doing a fight card. But there were also some people who I think, for whatever reason, whether they didn't like Dana White, they didn't like the UFC, they were celebrating and kind of gloating. And I said, you know what? The fighters put their lives into this at the most crazy time that you can ever do it. Imagine some of these people. And after I had written my column, my colleague Andreas Armando Botello sent me a tweet from Bilal Muhammad, which I hadn't seen. And he said exactly what I had written in my column. Screw you if you're cheering because my event was canceled. And I'll go back to you, Andreas, and start with you, get your thoughts on this. What was your reaction from a fighter standpoint? I mean, were you, the fact that Dana says he's going to pay them was great. But when we look at this, what they went through, I mean, that was just remarkable what those fighters had to put up with, not knowing if they were going to fight, where they were going to fight, and in some cases, who they were going to fight.
Yeah, the term, sometimes you got to save a fighter from themselves. I think that applied here because, yes, these guys put themselves at risk. And I just hate that they had to go through all that to get to this point, especially less than a week out, and well, a little bit more than a week and a half out, where they're training at home. But you see a guy like Justin Gaethje taking the fight on 13 days notice. Are we going to really get the best out of Justin Gaethje? But he's really putting his life on the line. All these fighters were truly putting their lives on the line for this card because we don't know what would have happened. So celebrating, look, social media is a cynical place. And there's a lot of people who are just truly cynical, and they're just going to poo-poo over anything that Dana says. Me, it was more like a sigh of relief that these guys didn't have to do it. Once I heard they got paid, I was extremely happy because now You know, they make their livelihood off of this. And I think more than anything else, yes, we all want to fight. As a writer, if I get one of my articles killed, I'm unhappy. But if it's for the right reasons, I'm getting paid for it, okay, I can understand the reasoning here. So anybody who celebrated it is totally wrong. But I think the vast majority is, like you said, we're happy that they didn't have to push forward and put so many people at risk.
Dave, Andreas mentioned Gaethje. He takes the fight on less than 2 weeks' notice against a guy like Tony Ferguson, and he told Brett Okamoto that at best he would be 90 to 95%. I don't think there's too many guys in the world that want to be fighting Tony Ferguson when they're 110%. And here's Justin Gaethje taking it at 90 to 95% maximum. Obviously, I'm asking you to speculate, but was that a good career move for Justin Gaethje? If this fight would have happened, was it a good move to go into that cage and fight Tony Ferguson when you're anything less than 100%?
That's a tough one, because at the same time, they would probably have an incredible fight as long as it lasted. And I mean, that was the problem, is if he came out really hard, he may not be able to last, especially it's a 5-round fight. So as a 5-round fight, that's a real challenge. And I think he would have been an underdog for that very reason. Number one, almost everyone's going to be an underdog against Ferguson anyway. But Ferguson's the kind of a guy, because of the way he pushes the pace and everything like that, that if you're not 100% stamina-wise, and you can't be in 12, 13 days, then, you know, I mean, really, Gaethje's only chance was to win it in the first round, I think. I think after that, he would have been, at the same time, I think UFC would have, and fans too, probably would have understood. I don't think it would have been a career killer or anything, but you know, it
puts him back though, doesn't it, Dave? In other words, you know, all of a sudden now, if he loses, now, you know, who's he going to get next? I mean, obviously he's going to get a lot of great fights, but it maybe takes a Conor McGregor fight away from him.
Yeah, well, it would take the Conor McGregor fight away from him, I think, if he lost. Yeah. So you know, in that sense, it was he made me, believe me, he was taking a big risk, not a career-ending risk, so to speak. You know, and although the damage could be bad, but I mean, realistically, I wouldn't say career-ending risk. But like you said, if he was in line for a giant fight, this could curtail him if he lost. If he won, of course, it would change. But he's going in against an incredible fighter, you know, with the odds against him. I mean, he needed to win quick. So I mean, one of the things, and it was actually an MMA Junkie article that really hit me, which is the one on Ray Longo, where we was talking about Chris Weidman. And I mean, I kind of knew with Jim's close.
And who wrote that article?
Yeah,
it wasn't me. I'll have to admit, it wasn't me. I wish it was.
Okay,
sorry,
but you know, I know here with AKA closed and everything like that, that it's like, you know, fighters are training, but you know, they're training running the track or something like that, and it's completely different from fight training. And you know, Ray Longo is training Chris, who's at home, by you know, whatever, the phone,
FaceTime,
right? FaceTime on the phone. So it's kind of like, when I read that, and it kind of hit me, it's like, okay, this is cool if you want to stay in shape and everything like that while you're home, but it's like, to go out and do a 5-round fight when you're, you know, when you and your trainer are on FaceTime together training you, it's like, this is just, it's just not right. You know, if fighting was like basketball, it would be one thing, but it's a fight. And it's like, to go into a fight when you're, you know, not at your best and you're not trained at your best, what we're getting is we're getting, you know, weakened fights. And, you know, guys, short-term careers and even long-term careers depend on wins and losses so much that it's like we're throwing guys, it's like we're throwing guys into battle, like in a war, but we're giving them no weapons. And so that was another thing about fighting right now. If the gyms aren't there and your training partners aren't there, I mean, we're not getting the best fighters in the world, even though they are, you know, the most skilled fighters in the world.
John, you wanted to say something?
Well, I was saying, I love that Dave lives in a world where he thinks you have to win to get title shots. Come on, man. That's not the world we're in anymore in the UFC. It's a whole different thing. So yeah, man, come on. Let's be honest. You can lose and just get a title shot anyway.
John, I want to ask you this. You know, I think the Khabib-Tony fight was just such a fascinating fight. Now that we come back from this, do you think that this gives us a chance to get it back? Is that the future? Do we see Khabib and Tony for a 6th time get made? Because, you know, whenever we get the all clear sign at this point, what is stopping them from making that fight? Right now, everything's on pause. So I wrote a column, what was it, on Wednesday, saying, hey, Conor McGregor's kind of the odd man out here because everybody was sort of matching up. and now it goes back to where it was on Monday, and we're there. So do you think when they come back that it is going to be Khabib and Tony yet again?
So you just want like the locusts to come and like all the plagues. I mean, the MMA gods just unleash everything.
I'm trying to bring it all on.
I mean, the MMA gods clearly do not want this fight. But no, I mean, listen, it is insane the circumstances that have surrounded this fight and why it hasn't been come together. I mean, obviously in the MMA circles, we joke about it being cursed, and now it's a global pandemic. But you got to put the fight back together. You have to. I mean, I'm sorry. You just have to. You can't go, oh, well, the MMA guys don't want it to happen, so we're not going to do it. I mean, that's a joke, and it's funny to say. But no, it's the right fight to make. It's the two best guys in the world. And, you know, kudos to Justin Gaethje. Props to him for stepping up. I mean, as Dave was mentioning, all the risks that he was taking, especially for a guy that throughout his career has said, I don't want to take short notice fights. I know what the risk is, and I don't want to do it. For him to be willing to do it, I thought he deserved a lot of credit for that because he understood what was at stake. And I'm sure the UFC was going to write him a couple little extra zeros in that check to make it happen as well. But yeah, you know, no disrespect to Gaethje, but yeah, I think you pull this apart, and I think you do Khabib and Tony again, and now you do Justin Gaethje and Conor McGregor. I mean, those are two phenomenal fights, two fantastic fights, and I think you just line it back up the way we
and
had
Poirier
it.
and Hooker, right? That
was a great one too. I love that. There's so many fun fights, and it's terrible that we got to put everything on pause and shuffle things around. But yeah, as the schedule gets going again, I say we go back to where we were. No disrespect to Justin Gaethje. I don't think you're taking anything away from him at that point. He understood. I mean, he had the fight for a day, right? I mean, he understood this is insane circumstances. So I think once you get going again, you set it back to where we had it.
Dre, what's your thought on Khabib versus Tony?
I mean, it has to happen. Yeah, like John mentioned, I mean, dude, what else could possibly go wrong? And I hate asking that question because, I mean, what else could truly go wrong? We've seen every possible scenario that tears this fight apart. However, on the other side of that, it makes it that much bigger than it was when it was first booked 5 years ago. So now we're at a point where it's a massive fight. And if it's the first fight coming back from this pandemic, if that was to happen, it'd be huge for the organization. And I think Gaethje has to understand. I mean, dude, this fight was in the making for so long. It was a guy who was two guys who were former champions, ridiculous winning streaks. It has to happen. And Gaethje versus Conor as a consolation, come on. That's huge. I mean, pay-per-view wise, I mean, these guys are going to be compensated handsomely. And I think there is no MMA fan out there that doesn't want to see Conor McGregor versus Justin Gaethje. That's an amazing fight. So put them all back together. Let's just act like these past few months didn't exist, and let's go back to the way things were.
I'm going to start this one here, and I'm going to bring this up because I want to get your you guys have great opinions. Who would have won versus Khabib versus Tony? I had gotten, I'd done a million radio interviews, who you taken, and I kept saying, I honestly don't know. And at first I said, I pushed, I'd say, I think Khabib. And then as I started thinking about it more, and you're going, hey, Ferguson has so active on the ground, and Khabib gets him down, and you get an elbow in there, or you get an up kick, or you get something. I mean, Tony just doesn't lay there and let you grapple him. He's fighting back. And, I started to, maybe lean to Tony's direction. I never really came fully set on who I thought was going to win. Dave, tell me, break it down, 1 minute, break it down, how the fight would have gone and who you thought would have won it.
As far as either guy could have won, I was slightly favoring Ferguson, but I mean, to me, that's what made this fight so fascinating was I absolutely could see Khabib getting on top of him and smothering him just like he smothers everybody else. And the problem is finishing Ferguson. I mean, in my mind, finishing Ferguson is just something that I can't envision. And as it goes round after round, Ferguson gets stronger and stronger. Could Khabib win 3 rounds and Ferguson come back and win 4 and 5 without finishing him? I could see that as a scenario type of a thing. But I was very slightly favoring Ferguson on this one. Yeah.
Dre?
Favoring Khabib. I was favoring Khabib from the beginning. I think the wrestling's just a little bit too much. And I love Tony Ferguson. I think he's so unorthodox. He gives you so many different looks. It's really hard to get your hands wrapped around him. But Khabib is world class. What he did to Conor, what he's done to so many people. I mean, I go back to the Edson Barboza fight and the way he brutalized Edson Barboza throughout that entire fight. That could very well happen against Ferguson. Ferguson's just quirky enough to find his way out of a lot of bad situations, and he can make this a very tough fight. But I picture Khabib, and just like Dave said, I can't picture Tony getting finished by anybody, but if it was anybody out there, it would have to be Khabib Nurmagomedov.
John, I'm going to get your pick on it, but I'm also going to get you to answer a second question after that, because Andreas mentioned Conor McGregor. And, we know that Khabib pretty much dominated that fight. But when you think about it now and you look back, Conor McGregor, a non-grappler, went into the 4th round, and he held Khabib off for 3 freaking rounds and not getting submitted. So afterwards, break down, how do you think Conor did against him? But give me Khabib and Tony, your pick, how you thought it would have gone, and then the part about Conor.
Yeah, what's funny is just pure X's and O's. I favor Khabib. I mean, the wrestling is so strong there. And Tony is great off of his back. He's great at staying wild in these bad positions. But at the same time, you don't want to be in those bad positions against Khabib Nurmagomedov. So I don't think that should be your plan A, is that, yeah, when I get taken down, I'm really dangerous there. That's not good. But I will say this. In the scenario that we're in right now, in the circumstances that we're in, I thought you were really swinging back towards Tony Ferguson. I mean, we're talking about all these unique measures that people are having to take to train, and they're not getting to do what they normally do. I mean, Tony Ferguson has some of the wildest training of anybody out there, right? And he does it by himself, and he does these weird things. So in the middle of a global pandemic, I was like, hey, Tony Ferguson is ready for this stuff. And then add in the fact that Khabib, is flying from California to Abu Dhabi, and then Abu Dhabi to Russia. And imagine if he'd had to come back from Russia to California again, all the time that he's lost in training, how that's going to affect his weight cut, which is already difficult as it is. So if we're just talking on a normal average day, I'm picking Khabib. I mean, listen, no disrespect to Tony Ferguson. That's why we want to see this fight. I'm picking Khabib. In this particular scenario, with all that was going on, I was leaning towards Tony Ferguson. So that's kind of the way I was looking at it. Now, as far as Conor McGregor, you're right. I mean, listen.
In retrospect, he looks better.
Yeah, absolutely. But as far as Conor McGregor goes, I mean, listen, he probably doesn't get, the respect. I guess, he was dominating that fight, but it wasn't like he was thrown out of there in 30 seconds. I mean, it was clear to me who was winning that fight, pretty much start to finish.
Right.
So, Conor probably deserves a little bit of credit for that. Khabib's style is not necessarily, though, the kind that's the one-punch knockout to get you out of there in the first round. It is a grinding thing, and it is that pace, and it is that pressure that breaks you and makes you wilt. I will say, though, I mean, Conor looked fantastic in his return. I'll be honest with you. I don't know. Competitive-wise, I think Khabib wins that fight on most days. I think Khabib, I would favor him pretty heavily in a rematch just because of the style. And I'll say this, too. I did not enjoy covering the build-up to that fight, man. The darkness that surrounded all of that, and just the way it felt, I did not enjoy that process whatsoever. So when people talk about what a massive event it would be, I agree with that. I have been fortunate enough to travel the world and see how big both these guys are in other markets. You know what I mean? Not just the United States. These guys are both global superstars. It would be a massive rematch. I don't know that it would necessarily be any more competitive. And I got to say, I would just pray that if it does get put back together, that the attitudes between the two are different somehow, because it just wasn't enjoyable to me. I understand rivalries and bad blood and all that sells it, but it went too far to me, to the point that I didn't enjoy showing up for the press conferences. I didn't enjoy showing up for everything, knowing what was about to unfold.
Well, it's always fascinating to talk about Conor McGregor. And so let's chat about him and his future for a second here. And the one thing that I think you can say is, Conor, to me, was on a downhill slide in a way, not so much with his fighting, but with the way his behavior was. And, when he first came into the UFC, I thought he was a likable guy. He was easy for fans to embrace. He was funny. He was engaging. He was classic with his predictions, what he was going to do. And then he kind of, I don't know if it was because he made so much money or whatever, but all of a sudden he started feeling, superior to everybody else. And I kind of thought his whole persona changed, and, the way he was acting. And then he wasn't so much of a likable guy. Did we notice at UFC, 246 in January, did we notice a little bit of a change? I thought it was a different Conor McGregor that time. John?
Yeah, I think we did. And I've been fortunate. I was there for Conor McGregor's debut in Sweden. Obviously, the anniversary of that was this week. And going back and kind of reliving the press conference and reliving them all. I mean, that guy had the greatest story, right? I mean, the fact that he almost didn't even make the flight over to Sweden from Ireland because he wanted to go get his 189 euro check from the government. You know what I mean? He was not going to leave without getting his 189 euros. And then, he's at the press conference and he's got a suit on, and he's that lovability factor is just like, I can't even believe it. 60 G's, oh my God, I'm going to go buy some suits. I mean, the guy was lovable, and he had the greatest story. And then to me, it started to change. The moment I remember it starting to change was the RDA press conference when he came in with the El Chapo's, get up on. And that was when the whole gangster thing started happening. And I didn't like it. And I got it. I mean, the guy is, as great of a fighter as he gets the marketing side of it and the promo side of it, he is awesome at that. You can't question the success that he's had, but it did start to change. But I will say, yes, to answer your question, the Conor McGregor we saw back in January, I thought was kind of switched back. I love, you know, some of the things that he was saying, the self-aware things that he was saying in the interviews leading up to that about some of the mistakes he had made and the commitment errors he had made and some mishandlings he had and the observations he had made about the world around them. And I don't know, I much enjoyed it again. I did think that he kind of switched back. And to me, I think that's well served, because I think that kind of bad guy persona or whatever had gone on so far that it had kind of reached an end. And I didn't find it enjoyable anymore. And again, once you lose and once you get dominated, you can't be the bully, right?
Exactly.
You got to kind of reinvent yourself. And so I was glad. I think he reinvented himself again, and I'm looking forward to seeing him fight again.
I believe all four of us were there and covered the Mayweather fight. And I thought that, Andreas, was a telling one, because I thought it kind of got racist. And Conor said some things in that fight that were just, in my mind, totally inappropriate. And I don't know if you ever come back from that, right? You say those kind of things and you espouse the kind of feelings that he espoused. You know, do you now just say, oh, sorry, and move on? What, you know, you're very sensitive to issues of race, and you're outspoken on the social media and in your writings. What's your take? Were you offended by what Conor did in the build-up to the Mayweather fight? And do you think he can turn the corner and kind of go back, as John said, and you know, kind of be the old good guy Conor?
Dude, John said it perfectly. Self-aware. You know, that was the thing about Conor, is he became a character. He was no longer himself. He became so absorbed with what he was trying to appeal to this crowd. And that entire press tour with Floyd, it was gross. I mean, you looked at those two guys going back and forth, and you knew it was an act. And it was just like, well, when is the off switch? When do you turn it off? And I felt like Conor never turned it off from that point. Right. I don't think he recognized that it was a constant on switch until he lost to Floyd. And then, you know, you go into this Khabib fight, everything went too far, everything went off the rails. So I think he could come back from it. You know, everybody's got short memories these days. All it really takes for a lot of people is an apology. That's really it. I'm sorry, and you move on. A lot of people defend their acts. I think that's what gets them into deep water. And I think somebody like Conor, who is a little bit more self-aware now and is conscious of the things he's done, the people that he's offended, I think in this case, I think he could say, I'm sorry, and move on, and be just as big of a star. And if you looked at him in January, and John mentioned it, I mean, you saw a guy who kind of shed that image and was back to being who he was. He was back to the guy when I interviewed him 4 years ago, where he said, you know, I fight, I make my little money, I spend it all so I can be hungry again. Like, he mentioned that. That was the guy who he was. I felt like we're seeing him all over again. It's not just about the prize and the prize fighting. There's glory in winning for him again. And I think he wants that glory again. I think he misses it. And he recognizes who he used to be.
Dave, I saw you shaking your head when Andreas was talking. I assume you agree with a lot of what he said. You know, it's kind of a dark time in that Mayweather fight, and some of his promotion, in my mind, didn't go over that well. You think he can overcome that, and you think he has overcome that?
I think that every time you kind of do a fight cycle, I think that it's kind of like your last fight cycle is what people remember. So it's like, yes, that happened, and you know, it was, they both McGregor and Mayweather, I think, got so carried away in the promotion of that fight that it became ugly. It wasn't really a fun promotion, but it was huge because of the larger than life personalities. And I think that, but once that moved on and they moved on, I think people kind of, you know, now they're on to the next fight cycle. And yeah, I think it's forgotten. And again, if he had, you know, once he beat Cerrone, you know, the whole vision of you know, Conor has kind of changed again, because before it was, you know, he lost some fights. He was constantly in trouble. And when you're in trouble when you're that rich and you're in trouble that much, there's trouble. There's a lot of problems. Since then, his name hasn't been in the news on a regular basis legally, you know, at least with anything new. And he won a fight as impressive as you're going to win. He looked fantastic. So now people, I think, kind of back on the, oh, I can't wait to see Conor fight again. You know, with Gaethje, anyone who knows the sport knows Conor and Gaethje's incredible fight, an intriguing fight. And, you know, and if he wins that, whether it's Ferguson or Khabib, that's a giant money fight. So I think Conor's fine in that way, as long as he stays out of real life trouble. I think he's fine right now.
Well, let's wrap up with this, and I'll go first with my answer, because I want to give you guys a chance to think of what your answer is. But what I want to ask you is, when does the UFC get back, and where? So that, you know, that's the thing. Because do they go to Fight Island? Do they go to Apex? Or do they go right to Tachi Palace or somewhere else? And my thought is this. I think when you see the Nevada casinos open, and you see Las Vegas start to reopen, and that could be, you know, late May, maybe early June, you know, who knows? Right now we're still the peak. Governor Sisolak said on Thursday that the peak, I think we were 10 days away. So, you know, I don't think it's going to be by the end of this month, but let's just say late May. Once we see the casinos open, in my opinion, I think you'll see the UFC then reach out to the Nevada Athletic Commission and say, hey, can we start putting some shows on in Apex? And they might run shows, you know, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and just have shows constantly running there to get caught up. So that's kind of what I think, you know, a sign to watch for the public is, hey, when they see the casinos in Nevada start to open, then you'll see UFC not long after that say they want to come back. I do believe that they'll put on a show at Fight Island. I do believe they'll put on a show at Tachi, but I think at the beginning, they'll go into the safety and security of Apex, where they know they have everything they need. It's all there. The infrastructure is built. It's a lot easier for them to do. And hey, they spent a lot of money with all this other stuff they're doing with not much coming in. So this will also save them money by doing it on their own property. That's my thought. Let's go back around the horn here. John, what is your thought? When will they come back and where will it be?
Yeah, I agree a lot with what you're saying. I think if we're going to be, you know, aggressively conservative, if you can do that, I would say maybe June 1st, you know, because, you know, obviously we know as Nevada residents, we're shut down here until April 30th. I reached out to Bob Bennett, as I'm sure some of you guys had, to find out, hey, is there even a meeting on the books, you know, for April that you could even discuss this stuff? And he never even got back to me. So I'm assuming that's we don't know right now. You know, so I'm assuming, I mean, first thing you got to do is you got to get, you know, Nevada back open again. You got to get the Strip back open. That'll be, as you said, the first indicator. And then, you know, right away, man, the governor, the state of Nevada, we're going to be looking to get some wins, right? I mean, they're going to say, we got to start bringing back people. How do we do that? Well, we get one of our biggest organizations that has a global footprint outside of the Strip going again. So I think everybody's going to be excited to get the UFC going again. It'll definitely happen at the Apex. I mean, that's what the facility is set up there for. Would not be surprised to see, as you said, weekday events, you know, two events a week. You know, I mean, ESPN is going to be desperate for live programming because I do think the UFC will be up and going again faster than other organizations will be. So, I mean, I think we'll see, you know, 2 cards a week at a minimum to get things going. And I think that's when we'll see things happening again. I will say that the big thing I want to caution everybody is, you know, there's been such an argument about whether the events should happen, starting with 249, that what I haven't seen enough of, and I want to see moving forward, is people thinking, okay, all right, you got those out of the way. If you were very opposed to UFC 249 happening, all right, you got yourself a win. Now realize whether it's May 1st, June 1st, July 1st, August 1st, you don't flip a switch and coronavirus is gone. Right. We are going to have to change things anyway. We don't get to go back to exactly the way we were doing things before. So all those people that were up in arms saying, I can't believe they're trying. Okay, now I want to see the energy going into figuring out how we do it the right way to keep everybody safe, because this is not going away. And unless we're going to wait for, you know, this you know, a cure to this or a vaccine for this, then we're still going to have these risks when we start going again. I don't think we'll see crowds at events in any sport for the rest of the year. I mean, we'll see. But I just would caution everybody, remember, we're not going to get to go back to where we were. We need to focus now on how to do things safely moving forward. And Fight Island is crazy, but I do think they will do fights there. We don't know how international travel is going to work and if there will still be continued bans throughout the course of the year. We don't know. So it's not a bad idea for them to have a backup plan in place. And as crazy as it sounds, it may pay some dividends for them. But I think we're going to see a lot of things happening in the Apex. Fingers crossed, June 1st.
Okay. Andreas, you agree?
I think June 1st might be a little ambitious. I know Dana will be aggressive in trying to do something June 1st. I think everybody would love to happen June 1st, but I foresee early July. I think International Fight Week at the Apex will be the way to go. It's a staple for the UFC. It's huge. Hopefully it gives us enough time to see, you know, the hump flatten out and people feel a little bit more comfortable. Like John said, I don't think there's going to be any audiences at fights for at least maybe till late fall, maybe till the top of next year, because it's going to be scary. People are not going to want to just jump on airplanes immediately. But I think Apex is the way to go. I think July is feasible. I figure that Dana will be really aggressive to try to get it June, because people are getting bored and a little stir crazy. They're going to want to see fights. And if these casinos open up, yeah, let's do it. Let's get the commission on board and let's do it. But I think realistically, I think we're looking at July at the Apex.
Dave.
So my belief is that it's really up to the commission. And I know Dana's going to want to go tomorrow if he can. I think that the commission needs to examine everything. And I think it's very important to me that the first fight is in Nevada, because if your first fight's in Fight Island, then you're looking like you're this renegade organization. And I think it's really bad for the PR for UFC. If the commission says it's okay and the Vegas Strip is running and they're running in an empty arena show at that point, and I don't have a date for this because I don't know enough about when everything is going to be right. When it's right enough that the commission is comfortable, then everyone's going to want to do it. And I think that at that point, you're a regulated sport. You're not running away from regulation. It's not anything that, and there's oversight, so to speak. It's not like you're doing it all on your own. So I think that once they are okay for Nevada, they should run at the Apex for a couple of shows. If they want to do shows out of the country at that point, because of international fighters that can't get to the United States, I mean, my hope is that by the time you're able to run in Nevada, the international fighters will also be able to come in because it is a safer environment. So you don't need to run Fight Island. I'm not saying don't do it, but I'm hoping that you don't have to do it because Fight Island, unregulated, the whole nature of that mentally to a lot of people is kind of like this. It's a bad image for UFC, I think. Running Nevada at the Apex with no crowds until it's safe to have crowds, that's good. And then maybe at times, maybe you start with crowds at, say, the Pearl or something for a minor show or a mid-level show to see if, people are comfortable. If because people are running around the Strip and the casinos are open, they're around a lot of people. If that is safe, then going to a sports event is safe. Now, I think it's probably safer in a smaller building than a bigger building. And also, it's going to take time for people mentally to go, I'm going to fly to Las Vegas and I'm going to be comfortable.
And they have to have disposable income, Dave, right? A lot of people lost their jobs and all that. Right.
That's another thing, too. So, especially with the type of prices for a T-Mobile event, right? So I think I think it's a slow process and the timing is out of our hands. But I think that the first show should be when Nevada, when a viable commission, a top commission says, look, it's safe enough to run an empty arena show, and then run it. And then at that point, slowly ease into everything else. And, when it comes to a big show at the T-Mobile, it's like, again, like you said, when there's income there, when people are not fearing travel, when you can fill it up, at that point, go back to normal, whatever normal is. And that may take till the fall. That may take till the first of next year. Maybe if we're lucky, in August, we'll be able to run, arena shows with fans. I don't know. But I'm sure that we're going to get a couple months of empty arena shows first.
Let's hope. Guys, I really appreciate you. I owe you a lot for your talents and for your willingness to come on and discuss this with me. I'm sure our fans will appreciate that. Thank you so much. And hopefully we can do this again. John Morgan, Andreas Hale, Dave Meltzer, my good friends, obviously some of the best MMA writers in the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You brother.